Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. So I made this voiceover for my normal YouTube channel videos, but I'm also putting it in the Journey series, and it's kind of a unique perspective, at least unique from what I present. I haven't heard anybody else talk about this the way I talk about it here. And so I'm going to put this up on both my backup channel and the Gratefullness meditation channels. So without further ado, here it is. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is Saturday, September 28th, and I'm probably going to let this video out for the public on the 30th, which will be Monday. I'm not sure. I think so. Yeah, that's it. I just made a video public, so I'm a little bit ahead of the game here, which is good. And so I wanted to talk about my relationship with my soul. Now, first of all, if you say to anybody or most people that believe in a soul, right? If you don't believe in a soul, this doesn't apply. But most people believe in a soul. And if you said to them, what's the relationship with your soul? They wouldn't know what the F you're talking about. They wouldn't really be able to come up with an answer. They might say some BS thing just to, not sound like they don't have any answer to it. Because they'll probably think, well, I should have some relationship with my soul. But they don't. They're not working on it. Religious people, people who claim to love God, who believe that they have a soul, and they're not doing anything to cultivate any sort of relationship, which seems odd, right? If you believe that you have a soul, a part of you that is your true self that's manifesting your body and your ego and your physical, that's what a soul is, right? The soul manifests the subtle bodies that make up your material life, your physical life, but your soul is your actual life essence. It's the, without a soul, you don't have an existence, you die, right? Like if your soul leaves your body, I mean, not just during sleep or something, but if your soul just said, F it, I'm done with this body, you would be dead. Like you would cease to think or any of these things, right? So it's kind of an important thing, right? I mean, if you understand the definition of the soul, the discovery of the soul came in ancient India, and it was called the Atman. Like people think about the various religions that talk about having a soul, various belief systems. But in terms of modern day humanity, if you think about various concepts and inventions and, where was the wheel first invented? Was it invented in various places simultaneously, right? Like was there people all across the globe that all of a sudden realized, well, we need something to, we saw a wheel and we saw a rock rolling down the hill. And you had an idea to, make something that they could use like that to easily push things, right? Like fire. Human beings at some point started using fire. When was that? And when was the first time that people used fire? When did they get that inspiration? And so, in terms of knowledge of the soul, it came from ancient India, the Atman, and there's all this knowledge that comes with it that's been, dumbed down. These dumbed down religions don't talk about, but the idea of these causal bodies, right? These manus, the mind, and there's these various other subtle bodies that create your ego and create your, who you are as a person, right? And so people don't even, think about any of those things. Don't cultivate a relationship with their soul. Don't think about it. There's some reasons for it, and I'll get into that in a moment. But in terms of my relationship with my soul and, the divinity within me, I talk about this all the time. God is within you. You have a soul. God is everything. God is, the subtle, that God is the catalyst for all creation. And so in terms of my relationship with that part of myself, the soul within, the self, it is a relationship where I'm aware of my ego being flawed, my ego being the dum-dum, right? My ego being the lesser. The ego is the pupil and the soul is the teacher. The soul will never be wrong because it's, it doesn't have a choice. It's limited. Your ego isn't limited. Your ego is, you can be so many different things, including, making bad decisions, which your soul can't do, right? Your soul will only make the decisions, that divinity that support your divine path, your spiritual path, and the divine laws and the divine principles. And so I'm aware of that relationship where my ego is flawed and is often wrong or potentially wrong, And the soul can provide me with the right information, the right attitudes, the right everything. That my ego oftentimes is not going to want to hear what my soul has to say. And there's no conversation, so that's not an accurate, but the soul's point of view about something and my soul's understanding of something and the ego's understanding are completely different. And where my ego might get upset at something and feel like it's wrong, if you had a conversation with God all the time, if God was there and you could talk to God, you'd be pissed off. Your ego would be pissed off at God like 99% of the time, right? Like 99% of your time, your ego would not want to hear what God has to say, right? Let's say you're about to make a decision, and the decision is about something you want to do. Like you want to do something that kind of is a wrong thing. Like it's the bad decision. It's likely going to end poorly, but you just really want to do it. And if you had a conversation with God, God would say, of course you can't do this. What are you thinking about? Why are we even talking about this? It's silly. And you would get pissed off because you really want to do it and you don't want God telling you what to do. And that's what the relationship with the soul is like, right? And being aware of that you're bringing in a, wisdom and maturity and moderation and restraint to an ego that just wants to do whatever the fuck it wants to do, whatever it wants to do it, right? And so that's the relationship I have with my soul. That my soul, quite often, my soul's opinion about something or just how it feels about something. Maybe, my soul and my ego agree. It's just my ego's like amped up or, emotional about it or, whatever it is. And my soul's like, yeah, it's not that big a deal. Why are you so upset, right? Why are you upset by this? It's a calming presence. And so having a relationship with the soul is imperative and should be something everybody does because, it's not just grounding, and grounding's a bad word because grounding implies heaviness, but it brings in, sort of a sense of balance and maturity and, calms everything down and, makes everything, big picture is everything, right? So something else I want to say about this is that it's your ego and your soul don't speak the same language. They don't communicate the same way. There's no language. Your soul doesn't have a language. And so having a conversation with your soul and relating to your soul on that level is not, people channel and that's great and that's, whatever that is. But, in reality, it's, your soul communicates through feeling. Your soul will indicate through your heart and through your, more often love than anything else, but I guess compassion. But you'll just have a sense of what your soul feels about something. Like if you're having a relationship with your soul, like when you have pets, when you have animals, you have a way of communicating with them. Sometimes the communication level is difficult because they don't have the conceptual ability that you have. Like my dog's much easier to communicate with than any other real animal. Your dogs just have a sense what you want from them, and there's pretty good lines of communication. They understand whatever it is. I read somewhere where dogs really don't understand words, but they certainly understand tone. And they watch you and they read you and they have a sense of you, right? Now, with the chickens that we have, like I know when the chickens are upset. I know when the chickens are hungry. I know when the chickens want something from me, which is almost always just food. I know when they're upset. You can tell when they're upset, right? Like my wife and I had to apply some, they had these mites on their legs, and my wife, did some research and she found this cream for them. And we would go in there at night when they're on the roost, when it's easiest to catch them, and I'd grab the chickens, and they would spaz out, right? And I'm like, well, they're upset, right? They're scared, these things. If you pick up a toad and it pees on you or it puffs out, like it gets all puffy, it's scared. It thinks you're going to eat it, right? Something like that. And so, various animals, simplistic animals, and then more sophisticated animals have ways of communicating to you without sharing a language. You can read body language, you just have a sense of them. But, the communication is limited because you have different levels of comprehension and, more complexity as a human being. And so, it's just you do the best you can, right? And it's never going to be like a conversation you can have and that kind of a thing, right? There can't be extensive dialogue. It's just going to be simplistic. And so with your soul, it doesn't have a language. Your soul creates your ego, which creates your mind, creates the parts of you that you need to interact with the world, engage with the world. But those all are all physical manifestations, and your soul doesn't have the ability to think like you think. Your soul, like just like with God, once you start thinking, then you can get things wrong. When you start thinking, you start making your own choices, right? You start having your own opinions and things of the world, right? And so your soul doesn't have any of that. And so when you have a relationship with your soul, it's really just letting you know how it feels about something. Whether, there's energy there, like you could feel like you really want to do something. Oftentimes people have a relationship with their soul and they don't even know it. Of course you do, how everyone has a relationship with their soul. They just aren't conscious of it, right? They're not aware of it. But your soul is letting you know all the time about the choices that you make. And, it's subtle, so you have to really go within and actually ask those questions and, want the feedback. You want the feedback from your soul, right? And if you practice this long enough, it becomes automatic that when you're making choices, your soul just doesn't let you make the wrong choices. You make more and more mature choices, more and more, the choices that the divinity within you wants you to make, and you make better decisions because, your ego is minimized. And there's, as you get older, I mean, the way it's supposed to work is this, that you're born and you have to manifest an ego. You have to manifest the qualities that you're supposed to exhibit during this life. Have your samskaric patterns, your past impressions, and who you are as a person. You have to have, opinions about things and likes and dislikes and, tendencies. And you have a personality that develops through your experiences. And it's all about developing your physical life and who you are as a human. And then as you get into the adult years, you become more aware of your spiritual side and you start cultivating that relationship. And you need, your ego, you need your energy, you need your, emotions and things and your preferences. But then after a while, you realize a lot of those things are, you're not making the right decisions because of your desires and the things that you think you really want. And when you get those things, you realize, oh, I really didn't want those things in the first place. And so your soul, you start surrendering to your soul, which guides you on a spiritual path. And we start making decisions, like I said, based in these experiences of feeling your soul and, what your soul wants you to do. And when there's times to make choices, especially the big choices, you know what you're supposed to do. And, there's a, mix of your ego and your soul, right? I mean, when I give these talks here, inspiration comes to me. Some of it's me, some of it's my ego, some of it's the way I conceptualize the world, but most of it, and the more, the better stuff, the stuff that's more profound and more, has more value or should have more value, comes through the spiritual side, comes through the, the etheric world, whether it be my soul or some other etheric being that's, communicating with me in some way or using me as a conduit, right? This is how the Sahaj Marg system works. And as you get older and older, the ego disappears. The ego just starts to be minimized. And more what you're exhibiting is, and this is what's supposed to happen. It doesn't really happen in most people's cases because they don't engage in the process of making it happen, right? But your soul starts to, take over and starts to, manage everything in a very subtle way, not, dominating your ego, but just your ego is surrendering to your soul, and your soul's sees the soul as the, the catalyst, the divine being, the creator of the your life and who you are as a person, your ego. And your soul starts to emerge, and more your soul just pours out of you. And ultimately, this idea of laya vasta, the Sanskrit word for merging with the soul or the self, and in the most divine cases, the best case scenario, the most evolved people, your soul has reached its peak, its evolves to the highest levels of spiritual attainment, and it's pouring out of you as a human being, and your ego is, there, but more or less not even, your ego has become divinized itself, right? And so that's what it means to merge in God. When God merges in you, where your divine essence, the highest level of person that you could be, your best version is now manifested, and these small self and these egotistical behaviors and emotions have been, you evolve past those types of things, right? And I'm saying this because I was thinking about how there are people that come to listen to me, and they see that I have something of value, this stuff that I'm talking about here, and they see that I can see things differently, and I'm on a different level or whatever in terms of my, spiritual progress or whatever it is, like in terms of my conceptual abilities. But ultimately, I'm going to say something their ego doesn't like, or just the way I am as a person, or something rubs them a wrong way, and it gives them an easy excuse to dismiss what I'm saying because they can see some character flaw or something that they think is lesser than in me or whatever it might be, right? Because that's how the human ego works, is that your ego wants to be what it is, and the things that it's attached to. Like, let's say somebody comes here and they love everything I say, and they find me insightful, and they just, they see that I get it, that I, crack the code to whatever extent, in terms of these these truther things that I do. But then I say, oh yeah, Trump is in on it, and their ego doesn't want to believe that because Trump is, their savior or whatever it is, right? And so if they find some way to dismiss me, there's that one person that recently wrote that I didn't know some, that guy, whatever his name, Dr. Ben Carson. I didn't know that he was a doctor, and I said he was a preacher. And he said, when you make mistakes like that, I can't share this with my dopey family. I'm like, fuck your family, bro. Like, I don't care about your family. Because, when somebody does the kind of work that I'm doing, and it isn't, there's much higher levels of this type of work. But when someone does this kind of work, you should be nothing but grateful that, for those of you who have some kind of spiritual awakening from my videos, and I play that role for you because it's really about you. Because, I've had like hundreds of millions of views, and maybe, I don't know, at most 5,000 people, 10,000 people, I don't know how many it is, have had some sort of, awakening about their spiritual self because of the, and I talk about it all the time. So really it's not about me. It's about the people who are looking for that thing, looking for that experience. They're looking to have a spiritual path. I mean, I don't even know. It might be less than 1,000. I have no idea of how to, and there's lurkers and there's people who've never commented about it, but, they've had some kind of spiritual epiphanies because of what I say, right? And, so I'm being a catalyst for something that they're craving, and it happens to come through me, right? And when somebody does that for you, and divinity pours through them, and you're willing to act as a conduit for, communication to you. Like, there could be things in my videos that are specific to one person that I'm completely unaware of. Like, I might not even know this person's watching. They might not even be a presence. They don't comment. They don't. So, I have no idea that this person even exists. And yet the divinity within me was, is talking to the divinity within them, right? Or the divinity within them is using, my, whatever, my willingness to be a conduit for their, for their benefit. So you're lucky that someone's willing to do that for you because you're not able to do it for yourself, right? At least at this particular time. Like, hopefully you can learn to kind of do that for yourself, and you don't need that. Or at least, the relationship's there with your soul. We all need sometimes external catalysts, right? And, my attitude, because I had to go through this myself, is fuck your ego. I don't care about your ego. Like, if your ego gets, butthurt, or your ego is finding a way to dismiss me or whatever, then you're supposed to fight it off. Like, you need to control your ego, bro. That's on you. If you can't control your ego, that's not my fucking problem. And it doesn't matter what I do, because, If you don't learn to control your ego, you're not going to have a spiritual life. If you're going to let your ego dominate your existence and run away from truth, I mean, that's for all the stuff that I put here. Like, that's on you. That's why I mock people in the comments. When I'm mocking people in the comments, is because they're letting their ego dominate their existence and not accept something that's good for them. Whether it comes through me or somebody else, it's going to be the same thing. They're always going to fail. They're always going to come up short because they're allowing their ego to dominate their existence, right? And so I thought of an example of this. So years ago, I was a preceptor, and my ex and I were both preceptors, and Master Chargy, we all had these certificates that said that we were able to impart these sittings, these individual sittings where you sit across from somebody, you transmit, and then you clean their hearts and things. It's a volunteer position. There's no cash. It's not a job. You're not a part of a clergy. You're just doing something that was done for you, right? Because I received all these individual sittings. And people who do this system inevitably want to be preceptors. I kind of wanted to be a preceptor. Like, I saw it as a evolutionary kind of thing, but I also was sort of anxious about the commitment. I'm more of a kid-like person, and I don't like to take responsibility. I'm not good at these type of things. And so, I had mixed feelings about it. But after about 2 years of doing the meditation, I became a preceptor. I was pretty happy about it, but, it was stressful. And, I wanted to learn and develop this craft and do a good job and be of service. And, it was going to help me on my evolutionary spiritual path. And then after some period of time, maybe 3-4 years, Master Chargy asked a bunch of people to turn in their preceptor certificates and put us all on probation. And didn't give specific reasons to any person, right? And I kind of felt upset about it. I didn't feel it was justified, as whatever. Like, I was, it bummed me out. And now it wouldn't be a bum me out, and I'm going to describe why. Because back then, I hadn't been through all the things I've been through, and such things would bother me, and they don't now. And so let me explain the rest of the story here, and it'll be obvious what happened. And so, in terms of the changes internally to my, my perception and my ego, right? And so, after a couple of years, we never got our preceptor certificates back, but we were never told that we were, on. In fact, I talked to some guy, and he said there's no problem. Some guy who was the secretary of the mission. And he said that you'll just get it back. Don't worry about it. It's just, whatever. And so I took that as like the guy knew what the fuck he was talking about. I know he clearly didn't. And so we were supposed to still give sittings even though we didn't have the certificate, but we were never told that we were no longer preceptors, right? And a couple of years went by, and a preceptor was telling me a story about how Chargy did the same thing in India, in Chennai, India, where he was living, because somebody accused him of stealing the properties and putting all these ashrams, which were, belonged to the mission, and putting it in his son's name, which, of course, he didn't do. And Chargy was so upset that to some senior person that he felt was like, was one of these people that he knew for a long time and things, would accuse him of something like that and be completely wrong about it. And he got really hurt. Like, he's just, some part of his, it was depressing for him that all these people were, it was just, he was aware of behaviors that weren't the kind of things that people should be doing as spiritual people. So he took half of their preceptor certificates, or he took all of their preceptor certificates in the area. There's 20,000 people. There's probably like 500 preceptors in Chennai. He took all of their certificates, and he only gave half of them back. And I realized, I said, wait, I never got mine back. So I wrote to him, and there was some confusion on the other end, and finally the guy who told me I would get it back, the secretary replied and said, Master says, Chargy said that only people with certificates are supposed to give sittings, which was not a good answer. Like, it was kind of like, I mean, he was always a very competent person, and this was done very sloppily, and the whole thing bummed me out and bothered me. But over time, I realized it was a positive thing because I was just overwhelmed. You know, I talked about my ex and, you know, her mental breakdowns and all these things that I had to deal with. You know, I mean, we'd have arguments and I'd have to hide all the knives because she'd threaten self-harm or threaten suicide. I mean, just it was like hell that I lived with. And, you know, having 6 children there, 4 children of my own, 2 from her previous situation, and living in poverty and just the struggles and just, it was a nightmare. Being a preceptor really wasn't, I mean, it just wouldn't have been doable. And also, when you become a preceptor, you start a center, like wherever you're living, you create like this energetic field, and there'll be people there who come to you and they are experiencing, you know, benefit from, you know, you have a personal relationship with them. And if you just move, you can't do that. And we had to move a lot. We moved, you know, a couple of times, and then we went to India. And so, like, we wouldn't have the ability to just go do that. Like, you have to be more responsible. At least you have to make sure that someone else has made a preceptor in that center. And the other thing is, like, my YouTube took off, my YouTube channel, I wasn't feeling stressed about, you know, being a person with a position in the Sahaj Marg system. And I could be more myself and not, you know, swear, for example, or do some of the things that I'm doing. Because I wasn't, you know, I wasn't a person they'd be like, oh, look at this preceptor that's swearing. And, you know, other people would come in and say, oh, you're not supposed to behave this way. It would be like ways that, you know, you're a preceptor, you're not supposed to be this way. It would just suck, right? And so it gave me some freedom. And so there's lots of reasons why it ended up being a great thing. Like I couldn't have maintained, you know, the work I was doing as a preceptor and done all the things I needed to do. And so whatever reason Chargy, you know, took my preceptor certificate, whatever his reason was for it, his, you know, whatever reason he did it. And he also, when he wrote back, he said, you know, I have to, you know, it's not like I just do these things on my own. I have to answer to, you know, basically his master and, you know, his soul. You know, it's like he was basically saying, it's not like my choice, you know, like I'm giving orders all the time. I've surrendered to, you know, my soul and, you know, this master within, and I have to do whatever the divinity within me tells me, which I didn't understand then, but I understand now, right? That when you become a spiritual person, you don't have a choice to do the wrong thing. Like, you're given orders and you're, you know, and it sucks for your ego, but you have to just, you know, knuckle under and just accept it as being what's best and that your soul knows more. And as I've gotten older, that same experience wouldn't happen, you know, because I just don't care about it, like any of it. Like, it just doesn't matter. I just let things, you know, play their natural course, and I just don't get upset about them because they're, you know, they're just not important. And, you know, it's taken me time to understand that, right? And that's allowed me a freedom to just say whatever comes through me. And I know it's going to hurt your egos. I know that, you know, certain belief systems are going to be offended when I talk about Christianity. I know that people who are, you know, I mean, some Christians won't care because they kind of, you know that I'm right or whatever. They, you know, they can live with the idea that, you know, what I'm saying could have some merit to it, right? But there'll be some Christians who'll be upset about it because of their indoctrination. But I'm able to say it because I don't care about your egos. Like, you know, your ego means nothing to me, right? Other people's egos, because, you know, mine doesn't mean anything to me, right? It's something that, you know, your ego has to eventually learn that its emotional reactions and its desire-based attitude towards the world is warped, and, you know, the lens in which you see the world and your personal prejudices and your personal, you know, opinions about things are not the truth. Your ego warps the truth, and everybody's ego does that. And so until your ego gets purified and you minimize your ego, you're always going to see the world the way, you know, in some distorted way. And, you know, that's not my problem. That's your problem, right? So if, you know, if you're here because you know, you see that I have some value in what I say, well, then this is what that's about, right? It's, you know, eventually, I mean, if I'm doing my job correctly, I'm going to say something that your distorted ego's view is not going to like. And because, truth would be pouring through me because I'm letting it pour through me. There are things that I don't fully agree with or, aren't my preferences that I say here. I believe them because it comes through a spiritual teaching. But my ego doesn't necessarily like them or wouldn't like it to be that way. And, the civilization collapsing. My ego doesn't like that. I don't like that. That's not, something that's a real bummer, right? It means, a lot of change, your ego doesn't want to change and that kind of change and, lifestyles, you get older, you have your preferences and things. And, it's difficult to give up so many things that are just habitual and, not just comforts, but just, routine and things. It's hard to change like your diet wholesale or change the way that you do things, right? I mean, that kind of change isn't easy when you're younger, but certainly as you get older, it's harder and harder. But I've accepted it. I've accepted that, everything, the information's overwhelming, that the system sucks, and when it collapses, it's a good thing. But my ego doesn't think so. My ego, I don't know how, it's going to be difficult for me and everybody else, and the older you are, the more so it is. But, that doesn't make it wrong. Just because your ego doesn't like something doesn't mean it's the wrong thing. And so just because you don't want something doesn't mean it's bad, right? Like more often than not, medicine, it doesn't taste great. The things that make you healthy, the things that are, are divine in nature, aren't the things that you want, right? Aren't the things that are, sexy and things that are, stimulating and things that are, provocative. It's, God's subtle and pure and things like this, right? Accepting the things that are, that you don't appeal to your ego or don't pop or don't excite you are often the people who are like that and the situations that you have in your life, the things that are like that, the wholesome things are so much better for you, nutritious things, but your ego wants something more. Your ego wants, it to be, some sort of, dressed up and, somehow more stimulating and more appealing or whatever. And so, that's what my channel is, and people should understand that. That if your ego gets upset, well, that's your problem. Like, control your little bitch, bro. Like your ego's your little bitch, and stifle your little bitch. Just if you want to say something, don't do it. Like I don't want to hear it. That's not, your ego wants to say something to me because it's upset, but really it's because your ego is, emotionally and desire-based, the desire-based intentions are distorting reality. And when that distorted reality gets confronted, you whine like a little bitch, right? And that's not, you need to work that out, right? So that's why I say the things I say in the comment section and the rest of this stuff. That's my attitude towards it because, I'm providing a service here. And that service is, to verbalize something or be a conduit for the verbalization of the collective souls of my audience, right? Which is a good job to do and should be something that's appreciated because most people don't want to do that kind of work or can't, even if they wanted to. Anyways, let's get into the other stuff here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Romano, definitely point for the Apocalaughs. And the Ascension, everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.